All right, let's dive into Rich Dad, Poor Dad. This book, man, it's been huge for so many people, like a real financial Bible. Today, let's see why it's still so powerful, even after all these years.
Yeah, Rich Dad, Poor Dad is more than just a how-to, right? It's Kiyosaki's story, too.
Yeah.
Like, using his own life to explain these money ideas. He had two dads, basically.
Yeah.
His real dad, the, quote, poor dad, and then his friend's dad, the rich dad. Totally different views on money. And that, shaped everything for Kiyosaki.
Exactly. It's not just the advice, it's how you think about money. Like there's that classic saying, the love of money is the root of all evil. Right, both dads had different takes on that.
Totally. The poor dad, he agreed with that saying. Get a good education, a steady job, and don't obsess about money. But the rich dad totally flipped it, said the lack of money is the root of all evil.
Wow, that's a real change in perspective. And this difference leads to Kiyosaki's main argument, right? That regular school, it doesn't really teach you about money.
Right. Kiyosaki says school makes you a good employee, but not necessarily good with money. It's this financial education gap he talks about.
Mm-hmm.
You learn to work for money, but not how to make money work for you.
And I think that hits home for a lot of folks, especially those who are great at their jobs, but still, struggle financially. Have you ever felt that? Kiyosaki says to break free, you got to understand assets versus liabilities.
For sure. This is the foundation of his whole thing. It's simple. Assets put money in your pocket. Liabilities take money out. Assets a money-making machine consistently, while a liability, it's constantly, draining you.
He's got these diagrams in the book, really simple but powerful. Like a house, people think asset, but if you're drowning in mortgage payments, taxes, repairs, it's a liability, right?
Yeah, that's it. Rich dad, poor dad, makes you think differently. Look past the surface, see the cash flow,
Which brings us to the rat race, right? Working hard, getting raises, but never really getting ahead.
The rat race, yeah, that's Kiyosaki's word for what so many middle-class people get stuck in. They buy stuff that looks like assets, a fancy car, bigger house, but they're liabilities, eating up all their income.
And to escape this rat race, Kiyosaki says you need to think different about money. He talks about these rich dad principles, strategies wealthy people use to build their wealth, supposedly.
One big one is minding your own business. Now, that doesn't always mean starting a company. It's more about building your assets, not just relying on your job.
He gives some cool examples in the book, like his first investment was this tiny condo, not to live in, but to rent out. That's minding your own business right there, building assets.
Exactly. Another principle, pay yourself first. Being disciplined enough to put money into investments and savings before paying bills.
Yeah, it doesn't mean ignoring your bills, but it does mean prioritizing your future. Financially, it's building that habit, shifting your mindset to create wealth.
Kiyosaki also talks about those mental blocks we all have. Fear and laziness. Fear keeps people stuck in the rat race, scared to take risks.
And laziness, well, that kills any kind of progress. You got to be proactive to build a solid financial future, right? One thing Kiyosaki says that's a bit controversial is that rich people use corporations to their advantage. This is where some readers get a little skeptical.
Yeah, he goes into how corporations, even small ones, can have these tax benefits that individuals don't. It's not about being, unethical, but about knowing the rules of the game and using them strategically.
Yeah, it's not about being shady, it's about understanding the system and how to use it, right? It's about empowering yourself. He also shares a lot about real estate. He's a big believer in that as an investment.
Oh yeah, he talks about using real estate to make passive income, building assets. And what's cool is he tells people to start small. You got to be a big shot to get going.
He starts with this small condo, rents it out. He's big on learning about the market, finding a good real estate agent, looking for deals, properties that are priced low.
Real estate's good too, because it can protect you from inflation, which stocks and bonds don't always do. Kiyosaki's all about finding creative ways to finance deals, negotiating good terms when you're buying.
He also talks about those paper assets, right? Stocks, bonds, mutual funds. He says the stock market can make you a lot of money, but you got to understand the risks.
Yeah, do your research, understand the companies you're investing in, be in it for the long haul. He even shares some of his own stock picking strategies, like looking for companies that are, underpriced in industries that are growing.
He even gets into technical analysis, using charts and patterns to make investment decisions. But if you're, hesitant about the stock market, he says start small, educate yourself, even use those investment games to learn.
He stresses that financial education is ongoing. It's about finding what works for you, building confidence over time. He also talks about overcoming, laziness with money.
He says laziness isn't just being physically lazy, it's like mental laziness. That keeps us stuck doing the same things. He wants readers to stop saying, I'll do it later, and start taking action, towards their goals.
He uses this analogy of a 98-pound weakling. If you don't exercise your financial muscles, you'll never be strong enough to build real wealth. You build those muscles by taking action, even if it's baby steps at first.
But one of the biggest things people struggle with is fear, right? Especially the fear of losing money. It can freeze you up completely.
He tackles that head on. Says that fear of losing money usually comes from not knowing enough about money and how it works. He's big on learning about different types of assets and how to manage risk.
He tells this great story about a time he had to make this huge financial decision, and he was terrified. His rich dad told him, fear can be a powerful motivator, but it can also be a crippling obstacle. The key is to learn how to manage your fear and use it to your advantage.
He encourages readers to, confront their fears. He thinks the more you know about money, the less you'll fear it, and the more confident you'll get in making financial decisions.
He also says it's important to take action even when you're afraid. He uses the analogy of, the Alamo. Says Texans don't bury their failures, they get inspired by them, turn them into rallying cries.
Just like a reminder that failing is part of learning and to keep going even when things get tough, right? He also talks about how important it is to not be arrogant about money.
He says being truly intelligent is about being open to learning new stuff and, questioning your own assumptions. He wants readers to be humble and find mentors who can guide them with their finances.
He even says that sometimes the best way to learn is to be willing to be wrong, to admit you don't have all the answers, and look for knowledge from others. And that leads to, his point about finding mentors.
He explains how mentors can be so helpful, especially when you're starting out. They can share what they've learned, their mistakes, help you avoid common pitfalls.
He tells readers to find mentors who are successful in the way you want to be successful and learn from them. He also talks about how good it is to teach other people about money. When you teach something, you really understand it.
It's like paying it forward and making more people financially literate. And being generous like that can be really rewarding, personally and financially. In the last part of this section, Kiyosaki gives some action steps.
He says, start small, do something, don't be afraid. He says to find your financial sweet spot, an area of investing or business that you're passionate about and think will grow.
He suggests starting with just $5,000, proving that anyone can build wealth if they have the right mindset. He says the important thing is taking that first step, even a tiny one, and building momentum.
And he's big on being patient and persistent. Building wealth takes time and effort. You have to keep learning and growing.
So as we finish up this part of our deep dive, what are some of the big things that stood out to you? What are you excited to try out in your own life?
I think what really got me was how much Kiyosaki emphasizes overcoming those mental blocks, fear, laziness, arrogance. It's not just about the steps you take, it's about getting your mind right for success with money.
Totally agree. Rich Dad, Poor Dad pushes us to get out of our comfort zones, to keep learning, and to believe we can create wealth. So, in that first part, one thing that stuck with me was that story about those successful businessmen in the 1920s. They had it all right, but then later on, it all fell apart. They lost everything.
Yeah, it's like a warning, right? That being good with money isn't just about making it, it's about holding on to it, making it work for you, not losing it all.
And Kiyosaki, he says that understanding corporations, how they work, that can be a real game changer financially. He goes into how corporations can help you build wealth and protect what you've got.
It can seem kind of scary, especially if you don't know much about business, but Kiyosaki breaks it down. He shows how corporations can have these tax benefits that you don't get as an individual.
Corporations, they can write off a lot of their expenses, legit business expenses, and that lowers their taxes. Employees, they can't really do that. They're stuck with just their income, right?
It's about being smart with your money, not just working hard and paying taxes without, really understanding the whole picture.
It's not about being sneaky or anything. It's about knowing the rules and using them to your advantage, taking control, right? Kiyosaki, he talks a lot about real estate too. He really believes in it as an investment.
Oh yeah, he used real estate to create passive income, build his assets. And what I like is he tells people, start small. You don't have to be a millionaire to get into real estate.
Yeah, he started with that little condo, rented it out. He's all about learning the market, finding a good real estate agent, someone who knows what's up, and looking for deals.
And real estate's great because it can protect you from inflation. which stocks and bonds, it'll always do that. Kiyosaki, he's all about finding creative ways to finance properties, getting good terms when you buy.
He talks about stocks too, bonds, mutual funds, all those paper assets. Says the stock market can be amazing for building wealth, but, you gotta understand the risks.
For sure. Do your research, know the companies you're investing in, think long term. He even shares some of his own stock picking ideas, like finding those companies that are underpriced, in industries that are growing.
He even talks about technical analysis. That's using charts and patterns to make decisions about buying and selling. But if you're not sure about the stock market, if it seems intimidating, he says, start small, learn about it, even use those investment games to practice.
He's big on the idea that learning about money, it never stops. It's about finding what works for you and becoming more and more confident over time. Kiyosaki, he also talks about overcoming, laziness when it comes to money.
He says laziness isn't just like sitting on the couch, it's more like mental laziness that keeps us from doing the things we need to do to reach our goals. He wants people to stop procrastinating and start taking action.
He makes this comparison to a weakling, someone who never lifts weights. If you don't exercise your financial muscles, you'll never be strong enough to build wealth. You got to build those muscles by taking action, even if it's just small steps at first.
But I think one of the hardest things for people to overcome is fear, right? Especially the fear of losing money. It can be paralyzing.
Yeah, Kiyosaki addresses that directly. He says the fear of losing money usually comes from not understanding how money works. He's all about learning about different types of assets and how to manage risk so you're not so scared.
He tells this great story about a time when he had to make this huge financial decision and he was freaking out. His rich dad told him, fear can be a powerful motivator, but it can also be a crippling obstacle. The key is to learn how to manage your fear and use it to your advantage.
He wants people to face their fears head on. He thinks that the more you know about money, the less you'll be afraid of it, and the more confident you'll be in making good financial decisions.
He also talks about how important it is to take action, even when you're scared. He uses this analogy of the Alamo. Says Texans don't bury their failures, they use them as motivation. They turn them into something positive.
It's a good reminder that failure is a part of learning, and you just got to keep going even when things get tough. Another important thing he talks about is not being arrogant about money.
He says that real intelligence is about being open to learning new things and questioning what you think you know. He wants people to be humble and find mentors who can help them with their finances.
He even says that sometimes the best way to learn is to admit you're wrong, you don't know everything, and be willing to learn from other people. And that connects to his point about, finding mentors.
He talks about how valuable mentors can be, especially when you're just starting out. They can share their experiences, what they've learned, even their mistakes, so you don't make the same ones.
He tells readers to find mentors who are successful in the way they want to be successful and learn everything they can from them. He also talks about how good it is to teach other people about money, because when you teach something, you really learn it yourself.
It's about, sharing your knowledge and helping other people become financially literate. And being generous like that can be really rewarding, personally and financially. Towards the end of this section, Kiyosaki gives some specific things people can do to get started.
He says, start small, do something, don't let fear stop you. He wants people to find their financial sweet spot, an area of investing or business that they're passionate about and that they think has potential for growth.
He suggests starting with just $5,000, showing that anyone can build wealth if they have the right mindset and the right strategies. He says the most important thing is to take that first step, no matter how small, and keep going from there.
He's really big on being patient and persistent. Building wealth takes time and effort, and you have to be committed to learning and growing along the way.
So wrapping up this part of our deep dive, what are some of the key takeaways that have really stuck with you? What are you excited to start doing in your own life?
What stood out to me was how much he emphasizes overcoming those mental blocks. The fear, the laziness, the arrogance. It's not just about the mechanics of investing. It's about having the right mindset for success.
Yeah, I totally agree. Rich Dad, Poor Dad is all about getting out of our comfort zones, challenging ourselves to learn, and believing that we can create wealth.
Welcome back to our deep dive into Rich Dad, Poor Dad. So we've been talking about how Kiyosaki's book really flips the script on how we think about money. It's not just about how much you make, but your whole mindset about wealth and where your income comes from.
Right, and to show that, he uses this thing called the cash-ish flow quadrant. basically a way to categorize how people earn money and which categories have more potential for financial freedom.
I thought that was super interesting. He breaks it down into employees, self-employed, business owners, and investors. Yeah, so the E quadrant, employees, they trade their time for money, working for someone else's company, right? Then the S quadrant, self-employed, they're their own boss, but they still got to work to make money. Their income's directly tied to how much they work.
And then you got the B quadrant, business owners. They build systems and teams, so their businesses can make money even when they're not working. And lastly, the I quadrant, investors. They make their money work for them through investments, stuff that creates passive income.
Kiyosaki's point is that real financial freedom, it's about moving from the left side of the quadrant, the E and S quadrants, over to the right side, the B and I quadrants. He's not saying being an employee or self-employed is bad, but you're kind of limited by how much time you have.
Like he gives the example of a doctor, super skilled, makes good money, but their income's still limited by how many patients they can see, right? But a business owner, they could build a practice that generates income even when they're not seeing patients themselves.
Yeah, it's a total mindset shift. Thinking about where your income comes from and like how to build wealth that keeps working for you, even when you're not actively working.
Now, I know changing quadrants sounds kind of daunting, right? Kiyosaki gets that. He talks about overcoming those mental hurdles. He calls them objections, those little voices in our heads that tell us we can't do it.
It's cool how he handles that. He says, write down those objections, look at them closely, and then challenge them. Like, are they real, or is it just fear holding you back?
He even says to find proof that contradicts your objections. Like, if you're thinking, I can't afford to invest, look for stories of people who started with nothing and built wealth. It's about changing your perspective.
Kiyosaki is also big on finding your financial genius. It's those unique skills and talents that you can use to create wealth.
That really resonated with me. It's not about trying to be someone you're not. It's about figuring out what you're good at and what you're passionate about, and then finding ways to make money with those things.
He uses the example of someone who loves working with their hands, good at fixing stuff. Maybe they start a handyman business or invest in real estate and learn to do renovations themselves. It's about finding that perfect spot where your skills and interests meet, where you can make money doing what you love.
I love that idea that your path to wealth can be something you actually enjoy.
Totally. And what's even cooler is Kiyosaki's vision of a world where everyone's financially literate, where everyone has the power to create a better future for themselves.
He talks about how important it is to teach kids about money, to break those cycles of financial struggle that get passed down through families. It's about giving people the tools and knowledge to be in control of their finances.
He even challenges readers to think bigger, how can you use your wealth to make a positive impact on the world?
It's a good reminder that financial freedom isn't just about yourself. It's about having the power to make a difference and contribute to something bigger.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into Rich Dad, Poor Dad, I'm feeling really inspired. It's a call to action, to really look at our own beliefs about money and start taking steps to create a better financial future.
Rich Dad, Poor Dad is a book that makes you question the way things are, to think differently about money, and to believe that you can achieve financial freedom. It's a journey, of self-discovery and learning and taking control.
And it all starts with that first step. What's one small thing you can do this week, no matter how small, to start using these principles in your life? Maybe read a book about investing, set up a budget, or even just talk about money with a friend. Take that step and keep moving forward.
Rich Dad, Poor Dad reminds us that financial freedom is possible for anyone who's willing to learn, take action, and never give up on their dreams.